Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Rollins, HSJGA Executive Director. I'd like to welcome you all to the HSJGA Rules Education webinar. Obviously, some interesting times, and just our staff and organization. Obviously, we're thinking of everybody out there, and we hope everyone's feeling well and safe. And we're just trying to basically stay busy on our end and connect with our membership. And we thought that this was a great time to start running some webinars, kind of in place of a few of the tournaments that we've had to postpone or cancel, and help you improve some of your education. That's obviously important. So I'd like to introduce you to, and many of you know them already, but Ryan Toole, our Director of Tournament Operations, and to Mary B. Porter King, HSJGA President and USGA Rules Official. So the two of them will kind of take you through a presentation today on the rules of golf and kind of some information that we think that will be beneficial to you as a junior golfer. So Ryan, I will hand it off to you.
I think his microphone might be off.
Oh, Ryan, I think your
microphone's
not
off.
Connected.
Okay, sorry. All right. Anyway, I was saying thanks, Matt. And yeah, I think this is a great way, like Matt said, to improve our educational outreach for you guys. Obviously, this is a little bit unconventional in terms of what we typically do for a rules session. It's a little easier to be able to demonstrate things and do things on course, but it's always good to kind of review the content, review what's in the rules. And the nice thing about the rules that changed last year is that they're a lot more easy to understand, a little bit more easy to read. So what we've done, essentially, we've kind of mapped out 5 webinars over the next 5 weeks. And we're going to go through the different sections of the book. The rules book is broken out into different sections themselves. And today we're starting with the first section, which talks about the fundamentals of golf. And it's rules 1 through 4. So rules that aren't really complicated, but rules that are crucial to understanding the game itself and how it's played with the rules of golf. So here's our overview today. This is what we're going to be reviewing. Rule 1 covers the game, player conduct, and it talks a little bit about playing by the rules. The second rule talks about the course and the different areas of the course and why it's important to know where your ball lies in those areas. The next one talks a little bit about competition, the difference between stroke play and match play. And then we're going to go over a little bit of stuff about equipment, talking about your clubs, your golf balls, and other different things you may use while you're out on the course. What we're going to do in terms of questions, if you guys have any questions, we're just going to kind of hold those on your own, and then you can send them in to us, either me or just our office email, and we'll be sure to review those and get you any answers that you need. So rule number 1, another great thing, if you guys have your rule book with you, if you can, you can pull it out. We're pretty much going to go rule by rule here in the first 4. So if you're able to read through your rule book with us or with me, that would be even easier on you. Let me just fix my window here real quick.
So,
okay,
Ryan,
so rule number 1. Sorry, go ahead.
Ryan, yeah, I just want to mention that the good news for everyone that's listening is that the rules changed last year, and lucky you and lucky all of us, they won't change again for another 3 years. So it's a 4-year rule rotation. So the good news is hopefully this will just help you as building blocks. And as Ryan mentioned, that the rules are much easier to understand and use. So I hope this will start building blocks. And I think I look at the rules as like a foreign language. The more you study it, the more you look at it, the better you're going to be. So don't think that you've listened to it once and you have an understanding. Please join us each time, and you'll be surprised how much more you learn.
Totally agree with that. Yeah. And it's not something I think, it is that foreign language that you can always get better at. You can always master even more. So one thing that I really like about the new rules that came out last year was in the beginning of each rule, it talks about the purpose of that rule, why they're putting it in the book, and why it's important to you as a player. And the purpose of the first rule is it talks about the central principles to golf, playing the course as you find it, and playing the ball as it lies, playing by the rules, obviously, and in the spirit of the game. And then it also goes over your responsibilities for applying your own penalties if you breach a rule, so that you don't gain an advantage over your opponent, say in match play, or over the entire field in stroke play. So first rule really talks about the importance of the basics of the rules, essentially. And it really starts off with talking about, you as a player and how you're supposed to act out on the golf course. You're expected to play in the spirit of the game. And what that really means is the first thing is acting with integrity. These are really things not only that are important in the rules, but, are key to golf, in that they better you as a person as well. So these aren't just important in golf. I think they're also important in real life in some aspects as well. But in golf specifically, acting with integrity, those things include, following the rules, applying all the penalties, and being honest in all aspects of your play. And then we also talk about, showing consideration to others, playing at a prompt pace, having good pace of play, being aware of your pace of play is also another important aspect of that. Looking out for the safety of others, and then also not distracting the player, or the play of any other groups or anything like that. Showing consideration to others is a key component of golf itself. And then last here, in terms of your etiquette in the game, is taking good care of the course. That includes replacing your divots, smoothing bunkers, taking care of those ball marks on the green, and then not causing any unnecessary damage to the course. And then a new thing that was put into the rules in 2019 was the ability for a committee to use a code of conduct for their specific events. And that's used as a local rule, which means it's enacted specifically for, say, a specific golf course, or in our case, for our specific events. We use our code of conduct as a local rule. And that includes, the rules allow you to, I'll bring it up real quick here on our website. It's in our handbook, and it's also on our hard card, but it basically is, our code of conduct talks about different things that could happen. And really, what the rules talk about is serious misconduct. So in terms of the code of conduct, there are consequences to different actions that happen on the course that violate our code of conduct. Here you can see a few examples right here. If you're not repairing your divots, if you're not raking the bunkers, those are small things. Obviously, there's larger things as well. Foul language, throwing clubs. In the past, a committee really had little authority in terms of being able to take action against players under the rules when these things happened. But typically what we would used to do is take away some points, deduct points, but there was no actual action in terms of penalizing the player or say even disqualifying the player. So now with the new rule of being able to create those code of conducts, you're able to do those things with players when they act out and they're not playing in the spirit of the game, essentially. So that's the first part of rule one, or that's really the emphasis of it all, in terms of understanding how you are supposed to act as a player while you're out there on the course. And that's the great thing about golf, is that it teaches you to be not only a hard worker and really work at your craft, but it also teaches you obviously to be a good person, teaches you good morals. Second rule we're going to talk about, the course itself. Sorry, go ahead, Mary B.
Sorry, yeah, just on that, and you showed them our hard card, basically, our rules of play. Since most of us are sitting home trying to figure out what to do, this is probably one of the most important documents besides your rule book and your local notice to players that Ryan and Ken make up for you each week. But take some time and read through that, because you'd be surprised. The more you know about the rules, the more they're going to help you. And you know, he's talking about etiquette, and that's great, and care of the course. But so many of the rules that we're going to be reviewing with you, the more you know them, it's going to help you down the road. And so take this time right now to really look and read some of these documents that we give you. A lot of time goes into producing these documents. And if you're going to play with us, or you're going to play in college, or you're going to play with the USGA, they each have their own hard card, and those are local rules that are in effect at all times. So make sure you know what the rules are before you tee it up.
Absolutely. Our second rule, we're going to talk about the golf course. This is obviously this is important because you need to know what your options are, what you can and can't do in the certain areas where your ball lies. Because where it lies can affect your options, what you can do in that area and what you can't do in that area. 5 different areas of the golf course. The general area covers the entire area of the golf course, except for the other 4 areas, obviously. Anything not in the general area, anything outside of the boundaries, obviously is out of bounds. So the general area, what it covers, the entire course except for the other 4 areas of the golf course. And specific rules do apply. We're not going to get into them today, but specific rules do apply to all the other 4 areas of the golf course. So the other 4 areas besides the general area, the first one is the teeing area. And the teeing area, the player must use, that's the one that they must use in starting the hole that he or she is playing. So not any other teeing area, say on that hole or on another hole. And it's defined by 2 club lengths, starting from the tee markers going back. There you go. The measure of 2 club lengths. And it's, like I said, it's that specific area that they must play in to start the hole. It's not any other tee box on the golf course, say on that hole or on another hole. So those aren't considered teeing areas if you're playing on that hole. They may be on another hole if you're on another hole, but for this whole purpose, you're just playing from one tee area. And then the second area of the golf course here. Sure.
Dad's quick note on the teeing area. The only thing that needs to be in the teeing area is your golf ball. You don't need to be standing in the teeing area, just your golf ball. So as Ryan has said, it's basically a rectangle, 2 club lengths from the outer edge of the markers. So just your golf ball has to be in that area, any part of it. If any part of it's in that area, the ball is in that teeing area.
Yeah, then you have all the bunkers on the golf course are another defined area of the course. And obviously there are all kinds of different rules, cans and cannots that you can do in those areas. You also have your penalty areas, which is a new term in 2019. A lot of people still hang on to that word water hazard, but you know, we now call them penalty areas because they don't necessarily need to include water. But in most instances, you'll see them marked as red, but they can also be marked as yellow. So red and yellow lines or stakes or both is what you'll see marking your penalty areas. The 4th area on the golf course, the putting green, and that's when you're referring to the putting green, it's referring to the putting green of the hole that you're playing as a player. So not any other green on the golf course except the one that you're on the hole of. So a little review, the 5 different areas. These are important to know again because you need to know what area of the golf course your ball lies so that you know what you can and cannot do in those areas. So anything in the presentation today that's bolded and underlined and italicized, that's going to be a definition. Essentially, it's a key term that you see all throughout the rules of golf. Something that's important to know. The definitions are a great kind of way to study your rules. If you know the majority of your definitions, you'll know a lot about the rules. So another section of the second rule talks about objects or conditions that can interfere with your play. And then certain rules, they may give you free relief for the interference. And there's specific objects, and again, they're specifically defined under the rules. The first one is a loose impediment, one of the most common ones that you guys know of. Maybe it's a leaf, maybe it's a pine cone, maybe it's a stick, something that's natural, that just kind of is there. Another object that could interfere, it's a movable obstruction. Those things are things that are out on the golf course that are able to be moved by you as a player, or maybe you and your playing partner, as long as it doesn't cause any undue play. For this example, this rake is a movable obstruction. And then you also have your abnormal course conditions, which includes a lot of different things. These are a few examples, and these are all defined again under the rules of golf. They're not just things that you can say, that's an animal hole, and you determine that yourself. It is defined. So animal holes, ground under repair, immovable obstructions, and temporary water are all considered abnormal course conditions. So things that aren't typically seen on every golf course, and specific to maybe a lot of rain, or some kind of maintenance issue, or an animal causing something. So those are different conditions that can interfere with your play. And we'll get into those a little bit more as we get a little bit more into the rules, and talking more about what you can and cannot do with those interferences, and kind of the rules that they present in themselves. The final section of the second rule talks about no play zones. And again, this is a new part to the rules, in terms of a committee being able to stipulate and identify these on the golf course. And it's defined as part of an abnormal course condition or a penalty area. And a player has to take from the area. So you're not permitted to play from them. That's if you're in the no play zone, or if it interferes, if the no play zone interferes with your area of stance or area of intended swing, playing a ball that's outside of the no play zone. So essentially, these are areas that are either protected or dangerous, and essentially the committee does not want you to play from those areas. Not something that we typically see in our tournaments per se, but they could be on golf courses that have, say, environmentally sensitive areas, or just areas that are really dangerous. So.
Hey, Ryan, are you hearing the? It sounds like our audio is kind of off. Is yours jumping around when you hear me?
Not too bad. Let me switch to my computer here. I'll use the audio.
Yeah, it's you've broken up. And see if you speak now.
Okay. How's that?
Oh, much better. Yeah,
A little bit better?
Oh, yeah, much better.
Good.
I just wanted to mention something too about the no play zones. It's a pretty simple to understand rule to understand. It means just that. No play. You can't play in that area. So make sure you understand that, because there are penalties that are involved if you do play from a no play zone. So make sure you understand the definitions.
Yes, and typically those areas are very well marked, I believe, right, Mary B?
They should be, yes.
And they should be on your notice to players as well. Something that a committee needs to, make known to players. So.
And a lot of times the committee are marking those areas for your safety too. So, or they're marking them because the course superintendent doesn't want you in there and messing things up, or again, mostly for safety that could be dangerous for you. So make sure you know what area you're in, and if it is a no play zone and you play from there, there are penalties that apply.
It's very important. And you never know where you could see those. You could see them at any golf course, really. So, moving on, we're going to talk a little bit more about Rule 3 and the competition. Really, what Rule 3 covers: 3 different elements. Whether you're playing match or stroke play, and it goes into match play first. Many of you are familiar with how match play is played, but it's defined as a player and an opponent playing against each other based on holes won, lost, or tied. The third rule really talks a lot about the results of a match. Maybe it's results of a hole or match. So it talks a little bit about winning a hole, talks about tying a hole, talks about winning a match or extending a tied match. Terms that are important in terms of understanding match play. It's pretty self-explanatory in terms of who wins and who loses a hole. But whoever wins the most holes in match play is going to take the match. It also talks about concessions, giving up, telling your partner on a hole that you're done on the hole and that you guys want to move on. It talks about what you can and can't do in terms of giving a concession. And then also it talks about something that we don't involve in our tournaments too much, but talks about applying handicaps in match play, where the strokes fall based on the hole handicaps for that golf course. And then it also talks about player and opponent responsibilities during a match. What you need to tell your playing competitor, how many strokes you've taken, things like that. Important aspects of match play there.
So Ryan, just as a historical reference on why match play appears first in the rules book, is that it was the first form of play for golf. And if you go around the world, hopefully you'll all get to travel and play golf all around the world. But in a lot of places around the world, and especially in the United Kingdom, play a lot of match play, much more than we play here. But I think the tournaments that you get to watch on TV, from the Ryder Cup or the Solheim Cup, those are match play, one-on-one. And when you see the word opponent, that's going to tell you immediately that you're playing match play. So
interesting. Yeah, that's a fun fact there. That's a good. Yeah.
Might point somewhere.
And then our next form of play, which most of you guys are maybe a little bit more familiar with, is the stroke play, where all players compete against each other. Essentially, they're competing against the golf course. Whoever can score the lowest score, they're the winner in stroke play. And then we got a nice little visual here for you guys, just in terms of the scorecard itself in stroke play. You can kind of ignore any handicapping things that are on here. I don't see any on this one, but the responsibilities of both the marker and the player in terms of keeping the score. This is a big thing in HSJGA in our program, is being able to keep score correctly and understanding what your responsibilities are as a marker and as the player. And you can see on this visual here, maybe I can, you'll just see the different responsibilities of each. The player is responsible, if you see this card, really, you say the player is really only responsible for signing their name. They want to make sure that their scores are correct, but making sure a score is in each box, that's the marker's responsibility, highlighted in pink here. And they also have to sign the card. So, and then you can see the committee. They're responsible, or they're the ones that'll add up the score for you, and they'll apply any, if it's a handicap tournament, they'll apply any type of handicapping strokes there. So, great visual. This is in your book as well. Great visual to kind of see what you're responsible for on the scorecard.
If I may interrupt, this is one of the most important things that you do all day. You could go out and shoot your best round of golf ever, and if your marker put in the wrong number for you, you have the potential to be disqualified. And so make sure that when you sit at that scoring table, and that you go over hole by hole to make sure your score is correct and it's in the correct box. Too many times over the years that we've been in the last 21 years of the Hawaii State Junior Golf Association, we've had many juniors that have been disqualified and lost events just because they didn't take the time to look at their scores. The other point I want to make about scorecards, if I'm keeping Ryan's score and Ryan tells me he had a 5 on a hole and I know he had a 6 and I write down the 5, I am just as guilty as Ryan. Okay. Ryan may have thought he had a 5. But I need to bring it up with Ryan and say, wait, I don't think you made a 5 there. I think it was a 6, and go over it. If there's any question, make sure it's taken care of at the scoring table. Don't wait to go home and tell your parents or friends that, geez, I put down a 4 and I know they had a 6. Make sure, it's very important that you make sure it's covered at the scoring table. You don't want to get disqualified for scoring errors.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a huge point, Mary B, is that it's important to not only, I know when you're in a competition and you're trying to do your best, you're really encompassed with what you're doing. But, it goes back to the first rule in that you have a responsibility as a player to, watch your playing partners and make sure you know what they're scoring as well. And not just worrying about yourself and worrying about your own score. It's important.
Yeah, that's exactly
what everyone else is doing.
That is responsibility, and make sure you clear up any discrepancies before you leave the scoring table. And it's much easier because you don't want to deal with it later.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, going off that, we're going to talk a little bit about, what happens when you do have a wrong score for a hole. Many of you may know this. This is something that happens at all levels of golf. And that's why, like Mary B said, it's crucial to check and double check your scores at the scoring table. Because unfortunately, if you sign for a higher score, that's gonna stand. So if you lost by 1 and you sign for a higher score, unfortunately, you lost by 1. So in the case where you sign for a lower score, like Mary B said, that is a disqualification. There is an exception in the rules that allow you, just in one instance where if you didn't know you incurred a penalty or you weren't aware of the penalty strokes needed to be added. That's one instance where, after the fact, if you found that you should have added penalty strokes to a hole and you did not, that's the only instance where you would not get disqualified. You would just get those strokes added to your score. So.
Ryan, if I may add a little trivia here from a very famous player from the state of Hawaii, Jackie Pung, who won the Women's Open by, she thought, 1 shot at Wingfoot, and unfortunately her marker put in a score that was lower than, and she signed her scorecard, and Jackie was disqualified and didn't win the Women's Open. Betsy Rawls ended up winning the Women's Open. So, like I said, it's very clear. So just take some time at the scoring area and make sure you and your marker agree on every stroke that's taken. So very important.
And that's why, like we always tell you guys, it's important to kind of review your scores after each hole rather than wait till the end and, kind of have to scramble on that. So that helps in that instance as well. And then here's the, a little bit about failing to hole out. Couple different things you have to do if you fail to hole out on a hole. You have to correct that mistake, and that's done before you go to another hole and tee off from that hole, or in the case where it was your last hole of your round, before returning your scorecard. So always important, obviously, to make sure that you hole out in stroke play, and if you don't correct that mistake in time, then it's a disqualification. Not something that happens too often. But there is that little instance where you have the chance to kind of realize your mistake and go back and fix it. And that applies to a few rules as well that we'll talk about as we get more into the book. So that's rule 3, talking about match and stroke play. And then the final rule we're going to talk about today is equipment. And there's a lot of things that go into this, not just your clubs and golf balls, but the idea of the equipment and the fact that golf is meant to be a game that challenges you, that really depends on your judgment as a player, your skill and ability. You as a player under the rules of golf are required to obviously adhere to specific equipment rules. There is a whole nother book that includes rules about equipment. The USGA puts out lists of conforming clubs and conforming golf balls. They do all their research in New Jersey at a facility where they test and check all the golf balls, and they're the ones that say whether they're able to be used or not, and they include all that information in the equipment rules. So obviously, all your clubs, they have to conform to the requirements of the equipment rules. And if there is an instance during your round where you damage a club, it normally cannot be replaced, but if you have that damaged club and you want to use it, it's considered conforming for the remainder of that round. And you can either continue to make strokes with it, or you can try to have it repaired. But you have to make sure that that's not causing any delay in play or anything like that. So say you have snapped your driver in half for whatever reason, maybe it broke over a tree, or maybe you just did it out of anger or whatever. You can always use that bottom half of the driver if you wanted to, or you could, however you would find how to repair it, you could try to repair it if you could, but you can't change the club's performance characteristics. So you wouldn't be able to just get a bunch of duct tape and put a bunch of duct tape around it, because unfortunately that changes its performance characteristics. It's not like it was before. And then it talks a little bit, obviously there's going to be a penalty if you use clubs that are not conforming, or that have been, say, repaired in a way that's illegal. A penalty for making a stroke with, one of those clubs would be disqualification. So anything that's not conforming, obviously you're not allowed to use it. So be careful with that.
So Ryan, I think that the USGA has softened their rule a little bit. I can't remember what we're calling them. But I think if the club is broken in normal course of play now, I think they have gone back to their old rulings. And that's why it's so important for all of us to keep up with the rules of golf, because with these new rules, the USGA over especially this last year and now almost a year and a half have realized that some of the things that they put into the rules maybe haven't worked out the way they thought. And so they've been coming out with what's the word I'm looking for, Ryan? That they a long list of
I think it's like an amendment, maybe.
Yeah, it's some sort of amendment. So there were certain rules that I think in the beginning that you all saw that caddies were getting behind the player on the professional tours, and they were having all sorts of problems with that. So they've cleaned a lot of things up, and that's why it's so important that we stay on top of them. Because it seems to be evolving, almost like the coronavirus. Daily we get updates, and the USGA's been updating. So be sure and check.
Yeah, sorry. I believe that the rule now is you're allowed to replace it as long, like you said, as long as it's in the normal course of play. I think anything out of temper or anger would kind of still fall under this jurisdiction in terms of being able to continue to play with it or not. Up to you there. So, and then in relation to clubs as well, 4.1 talks about the fact that you must not start your round with more than 14 clubs. You can have less than that. It also stipulates that players are not allowed to share clubs. You're not allowed to. Obviously this is a little different in terms of, it says you're not allowed to replace lost or damaged clubs. You can obviously, as we just talked about, replace those damaged clubs if it was in a normal course of play. And then obviously right there, as it says, when damaged by natural forces or an outside influence. So if someone else comes and breaks your club, or I don't know what else could happen. Maybe a rock falls on it and breaks it some way or damages it some way. You can replace it in that instance as well. And then for any breach of Rule 4.1b, which talks about your limit of 14 clubs, it's going to be 2 strokes in terms of having those clubs in your bag or playing a hole with those clubs with a maximum of 4 strokes. So essentially, you can't get penalized more than twice in that instance. Hopefully, you realize your error before you get to that second point. But and then the next part of Rule 4 talks about your golf ball and the stipulations that it must be conforming, obviously, and that's under those equipment rules that we talked about before. And then it also talks a little bit about if your ball breaks into pieces after a stroke, there is no penalty and the stroke does not count. So that's after you strike the ball, if it just explodes, there's no penalty in that instance, and you could just replay the stroke. And essentially, you play another ball from where the stroke was made in that instance. And then if your ball becomes cut or cracked while playing a hole, you may lift the ball to check to see if it was cut or cracked. But first, you have to mark the ball and you have to refrain from cleaning it. So in that instance, if you're trying to see if it's damaged in any way, you have to refrain from cleaning it in that instance. And a ball can be substituted in the instance that it's obviously cut or cracked and not just scratched or scraped. A lot of times maybe you hit a tree or scuff it on a cart path. Has to be clearly cut or cracked. The surface of the golf ball needs to be affected drastically in order to be able to replace it in that instance. And if you're unsure, especially in a tournament like ours, you can always get a ruling on that as well. So the final part of Rule 4 goes a little bit more into specific equipment not related to the things we use every day in golf. Maybe things that come in a little bit more when we're playing a little bit more competitively. The first thing it talks about is using any type of equipment for distance or directional information. As we're aware now, we're allowed to use the distance measuring devices. It's part of the rules now, whereas before it was more of a local rule. But you're allowed to get any information on distance or direction. Whether it's using a distance measuring device like the most conventional ones that we use, or maybe some people are using compasses these days, who knows. But and then things that aren't allowed, any device that is going to measure your elevation change, or any device that takes the distance and directional information and suggests maybe a club or a line of play or something like that. So that would be, I think, more with like something along the lines of like an iPhone app or something like that would be that specific. Although I have seen some rangefinders nowadays that do make recommendations on clubs and things like that. And in that case, those I think a lot of the cases you can turn them off, hopefully. Not sure. Also talks a little bit about equipment you can use to read info on wind, weather conditions. You're allowed to get any type of weather information, including wind speed, available on weather forecasts or on your app or things like that. And then anything, you can use anything to measure the temperature or the humidity. Say you have a watch or something like that that says the temperature, that's totally fine. But things that aren't allowed, you're not allowed to get to the course the day of a competition and go out there with your wind gauge and measure the wind speed. Or even, that I think that's talking more about, measuring it during your round per se. Not allowed to do that. And then using any type of artificial object to get wind related information, maybe that's taking a, one example of that would be like taking a handkerchief out of your pocket and specifically holding it up in the air to read the wind or try to get the wind information.
That's why they made grass, isn't it? Isn't that why they made grass, so you could throw it up and see which way the wind blew?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it can't be it can't be anything artificial. You can use, like Mary B said, you can use grass. You use someone else's hair or whatever.
Well, that wouldn't be good. I just wanted to add to that regarding what's allowed. You are allowed to ask your other players in your group how far it is. That's public information. Or is there a penalty area on the right? That's public information. So you are allowed to share that. You are not allowed to share what club you just used on a par 3, or if you and your other player are standing in the fairway, you cannot ask what equipment they used at that as well. So there's certain information that you can ask and things you can't ask, and there's penalties that apply. If somebody does ask you, don't answer because they got the penalty. And if they asked you in match play, the hole's over. So as soon as they asked, they were penalized. So different rules apply to different forms of play, and certain things you can do and you can't do. So like I said, the more you understand all of this, the better you're going to be. The lower scores you're going to shoot.
And that's always the goal, right?
I hope so. I hope so.
Yeah, and then this just talks a little bit about kind of what Mary B was just going through, actually. Information that you're gathered before or during the round. So maybe this is info maybe you got during your practice round or something like that. That's the perfect case. That's why we have practice rounds, right? We can use any information that was gathered before the round. Swing tips or club recommendations that you thought about before the round, totally fine in that case. And then any recording of playing or physiological information from the round, such as like club distance or playing statistics or heart rate. Those things are fine. Things that aren't allowed in terms of the information that you have about club selection or things like that. Any information that you have processed from that round. So say someone's out there videotaping you, they came up to you, they showed you the videotape, and you're using that information to change your swing on the next hole, or you use that information to make a club selection on the next hole. That stuff obviously is not allowed. That's taking away from the skill and your judgment as a player. And that's what really the rules about equipment talk about, is maintaining those things. And then obviously using any physiological information recorded during the round. So if you have, that's a tough one in terms of knowing whether someone's doing that or not, I guess. Maybe someone's trying to psych you out mentally. But yeah.
In the spirit of the game.
Sorry?
That wouldn't be in the spirit of the game, would it?
Right. Those are things that you don't come across too often, but in terms of the information you are and aren't allowed to use during a round, it's important to know this kind of stuff, because even when it strays away from just simple things like club selection and distance, and gets more into things like how you're swinging and what you're doing during the round, you just need to be careful of the information you're using there. So, and then the last section in terms of the equipment that you are and aren't allowed to use related to audio and video. So you're allowed to listen to audio or watch video on things that aren't related to the competition that you're playing. A good example of that is a lot of people like to listen to music while they play golf. Totally fine. But obviously, you should be considerate to the other people that are out on the golf course as well. Obviously, we're not going to allow that in an HSJGA event, because it just kind of goes against the competitive aspect of our events. It is, obviously, it's allowed under the rules of golf, but we make some local rules in those exceptions. So not allowed would be things, listening to music or any audio that helps you eliminate distractions or may allow you to improve your swing tempo. So a good example of that that's always been given is using like a metronome, something that gives you a consistent beat to help you be able to swing on a good swing tempo. Something that's not allowed, can't do that. And then video of showing play of the players, say ahead of you or behind you, to know what club to choose or how to make a stroke, or deciding how to play a specific hole or things like that. So, if Tiger is playing in the Masters, he's going to hit a shot, he's moving to the 11th hole, and someone shows him, a video of somebody, the groups ahead of him playing the 11th hole, that would be an instance where, you would not be allowed to do something like that. So. And then what's allowed in terms of gloves and gripping agents, pretty basic stuff here. In terms of, you're allowed to obviously use a glove that meets any requirements under the equipment rules. You're permitted to using any resin, powders, or other moisturizing or drying agents. Maybe say your grips are a little wet. And then it also permits wrapping a towel or handkerchief around the grip to again, maybe it's wet, maybe you need to dry it off, something like that. Totally allowed in that instance. What's not allowed though is using any type of gloves or grips that are not included in the equipment rules. And the funny thing is, if you ever go to the USGA test center in New Jersey, it's really neat the things that people send them. All different kinds of equipment that they're looking to get approved or get out there in the market. And first they need to get it approved by the USGA. So they have a whole shop full of stuff that has been sent to them. Some really intriguing devices. Stretching and swinging aids, not something you see too often, but with more fitness and things like that coming into the game, these things could play a part. So using any equipment for general stretching, whether the equipment is designated for stretching for use in golf or for any other purpose unrelated to golf, totally fine. But you're not allowed to use any type of golf training or swing aid, such as an alignment rod or weighted head cover, or a non-conforming club to make a practice swing or any other way that creates a potential advantage by helping the player in making your next stroke. So the most simple one that it's pretty much talks about right there is throwing an alignment rod down during your practice swing and really getting yourself aligned on the golf course. Those are things that you need to take care of during your practice round. You can't do that during a round of golf. So if you're ever uncertain, whether you can or can't use a specific piece of equipment in a particular way, the best is to just always consult with the committee that's in charge of the competition that you're playing, and they can always make a ruling for you. They're the ones that are going to say whether it's allowed or not allowed. So it's always important, even if you think you may, you're 99.9% sure, it's always good to clear up that last 1%. There are instances where you're allowed exceptions with specific equipment, and it's usually for medical reasons. And obviously, you have a reason medically to use that stuff. And it always, that's something you need to bring up to the committee. A lot of the times in our USGA qualifiers, those are things that you may see more often. Obviously, with our HSJGA events, we know you guys pretty well. And, we can talk about those certain things with you. But I think one instance would be some sort of diabetic device that people with diabetes sometimes have their insulin readers. Sometimes those are things that need to get approved or disapproved by a committee. And then also, you're allowed to use any type of like medical tape, things like that, as long as they're not like immobilizing a joint or they help you swing the club a little bit better. So again, something you should always get. Any type of equipment you may or may not need to use for medical reasons should always be something that's run by the committee first. And then if the instance where you are using equipment that's not allowed or not, not permitted by a committee, obviously you're going to get penalized in that instance. And the penalty for the first breach from a single act or related acts. So if you have a non-conforming piece of equipment and you use it and then you continue to use it, you'll get the general penalty in that instance. And then any second breach of the unrelated, that's not related obviously to the first breach. So maybe it's a different type of equipment or using that equipment in a different way, that would be disqualification. So just be careful with the stuff that you're using in terms of equipment. Really, for you guys, it's most important to ensure that your golf clubs and your golf balls are in order. You need to make sure that those things are what's conforming. So, but yeah, those are the first 4 rules. Things that really talk about the introduction to the rules themselves, kind of giving a little bit more definition to things like the golf course. And then talking a little bit about things that you can and can't use on the golf course there. So if you guys do have any questions, obviously you can send them to myself, and I will obviously bring Mary B in on them. You can also send them to our info email, but here's my email, take it down. If you guys have any questions, whether it's about these 4 rules that we talked about today, or about any others, we're always here as resources for you guys. When you have questions, and like Mary B said, it's always important to study these and to stay up to date on the rules of golf. One of the best ways is this website right here, the HSJGA.org. They have all the different rules resources that you could ever need. They have rules quizzes that you can take. They have all kinds of videos that you can watch. So great website here. This is their rules homepage. They're constantly putting out content for golfers to view. So if you guys are bored during this time, this is a great website to kind of just check out and learn a little bit more about the rules and just playing under them. So yeah, anybody, Mary B, have anything else?
No, good job, Ryan. That's exactly what I was going to say, was to go to the USJ.org, because I know they're all missing school so much right now that they want to take some quizzes and learn some stuff. So this is a perfect thing. Go to USJ.org and go to their rules page. And actually, there's some really great videos to watch and to understand. And like I said earlier, the rules are ever changing. And like I said earlier as well, they're changing now, and with new interpretations was the word I was looking for. But the more you know, the better you're going to play. And I'll leave you with this. And there are 2 players, and one you may not even know of at this point, that know the rules better than probably anyone in their playing careers. And one is Tiger Woods, and hopefully you still know who he is. And the other is Annika Sorenstam. They're both leading money winners and on their respective tours. And they knew the rules better than anyone else. And they used them always to their advantage. So the more you know, the more it's going to help you. So have fun.
Yeah, I think that's a great comment, Mary B. And I just want to let everybody know on the line that we are trying to limit these to 30 or to between 30 and 60 minutes, just because it's a lot of information to kind of gather. But I also think it's a great opportunity for everybody on the line today. Ryan has been running events now for 3 years with us, and Ryan's running, I think, close to 20 events a year. So he's seeing a lot of things happen with the rules and learning a lot as he goes, and recently attended a rules workshop on the mainland. And Mary B, obviously you're back at rules school every year, I believe, just to continue your education, and you're officiating at US Opens and US Juniors and NCAA championships. So I just think it's a great opportunity for everybody on the line to hear what you both have to say. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for putting this together today.
Thanks for setting it up. Thanks, Ryan. Good job.
Thanks, Mary B.
Okay, so we will, like Ryan said at the beginning, we'll be running these rules education sessions every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Throughout the month of April. So we hope that you can all join us again. This session will also be posted on our password protected section of our website for you to view again, if you please, or to share with other members. And then we obviously hope you're all hanging in there. We know that this is a difficult time, and we hope to have some positive information about our tournament schedule and our team events and our programs out to you all very soon. So thank you so much for joining us today, and take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.